So this video is going to be all about artificial intelligence, the new artificial intelligence features included in the 1.6 update to my toolkit. So to start, let's look at one of the units and its attributes and see what has changed since previously. So you will notice there is a new variable here called AI controlled. Now previously, whether or not a pawn was AI controlled was decided by whether or not its faction variable was set to player or enemy. Now these two things are independent. You can add any number of factions and you can choose for any unit whether or not it is controlled by the AI. And by default it will be set up so that it is allied with its own faction, and anyone that is not its own faction it will try to attack. You can add more allied factions if you want to. This can be done individually for each unit for maximum flexibility. So let's see how this works. If we take this guy and make him AI controlled, we can see that we can move this guy around while he will move on his own. They're still fighting on the same team. This guy I've also set to be AI controlled. And you can do the same, of course. Set up some of these guys to be player controlled. You can set up everyone to be player controlled, have hot seat multiplayer. You can set everyone to be controlled by the AI and just set up a scene and see who wins. So that's pretty straightforward, I think. So as you can see, you can add more factions here as allied factions. So if we set this guy, he's allied to both players and enemies, which means that he will not attack these guys and he will not attack these guys, so he will basically just stand around doing nothing and be killed by the enemies because they still consider him an enemy. By default, the units still consider someone who has attacked them to be an enemy. It is fairly easy to remove a faction that attacks someone from the allied factions if you want to add that sort of functionality. Okay, so what do you do if you want to add more factions than we already have? Then you go to Contents and inside Blueprints and Gameplay and enums, and then we have, let's see, the faction enum here. And you can just add more of them, give them a new name. There we go. And well, let's see. We have to save everything. So now when you select a unit and change its faction to the new faction, then the allied faction automatically changes to its faction, and then you can add more factions it is allied to. If you change to another faction, then it's reset to just being the faction it is allied to. Another way to do this, you don't have to set this up individually each time for everything. Just set it up in the unit itself might be a better way in many cases. But I mean, this is the most flexible solution I found, where you can set it up however you prefer to set it up. Before I go on to more of the AI stuff, I think I should go through more of these new variables and changes here. So yeah, this is square visibility. That's new movement option. That's similar, or before you might recall that it used to say diagonal movement, where for square grids you can choose whether or not a unit can move diagonally or only like straight lines. Let's set up quickly a square grid just to show how this works now differently, because in this new version you set up in the grid whether or not diagonal movement is allowed, and then you can for the individual unit set up whether or not they might move diagonally. Let's see, and how their vision can be independent on how their movement is. So for this grid, just to quickly show this, you have diagonal movement set to true, so he can move diagonally, and by default his vision is also diagonal. We can select him and then uncheck square visibility, and then visibility will be in a diamond shape. And you can change this in the grid manager so that there's no diagonal movement, in which case you will have this, diamond-shaped movement pattern. It is also possible to set up that some units have diagonal movement and some have straight movement. Let's see, but yeah, so if diagonal movement is allowed here, and then we go to the unit, then we have a new thing here that's called Pathfinding type. I've made it possible to make your own, like, sort of custom pathfindings that you can customize however you want to, and I've made some examples here. Pass through friendlies, which allows a unit to walk through other units of the same faction as itself. That's one example. And ignore difficult terrain, which means that it treats all terrain as having a movement cost of 1. Don't need to show that, it's self-explanatory, I think. No diagonal movement is the one I was talking about. So even though diagonal movement is allowed on this in this grid, this guy will still be moving like in straight lines, and this guy will be walking diagonally. So that is still an option, and it is easy to add more custom pathfinding options, but I will go into that when I speak about pathfinding later. For now, let's stick to the units. So that's the square visibility. Can split up move, that's from before, so that hasn't changed. Let's see, show all possible visible tiles, that's a new one. So this can be quite heavy on your computer if you have like really high movement ranges and sight ranges, but for most most ranges it works well. So you can see here that you can see any tile that you can have visibility to from any tile you can move to is displayed in red in this way. Let's decrease this a bit for this smaller map, so it's easier to demonstrate how this works. So you can see here, so this guy does not have diagonal visibility, right? So he can only look to here. So if we set that up again, I mean square visibility, so now he can see all around him in a square like this. I can demonstrate a new feature if I put up one of these enemies here. So now we should be able to attack this guy, right? So it shows here when you hover over him, it automatically shows a possible path you can take to attack this guy. And which path it chooses to take, that is that depends on another variable here, which is, let's see, yeah, the preferred range. So here you can set up so short move. That means that when you choose to attack someone, this pawn prefers to move as short as he possibly can. Other options are close range if you want to get as close as possible to another unit, and long range if you want to stay as far away as possible when you attack someone. And close range including 0, you shouldn't be using this for units. This means that they want to move on top of, at the same tile as what they are attacking. It will usually not work at all. This might be useful for other things where you want to find out or get close to something like a tile you want to stand on top of, or something for other purposes. For the default toolkit this shouldn't be used, but it's an option for these sorts of future editions. But if we choose, let's see, a long range here, and then we want to attack this guy, see here I'm already of a range of 3, so he doesn't want to move at all really. So in this case it would be identical, I guess, to the short move option. But if I stand right next to him, and let's see, he wants to move all the way over here and attack to get as long range as possible. And the AI can of course be set up in the same way, so they have these sort of preferences. So by default, the ranged enemy units, they are set to have a preferred range of long range, while the melee units are set to have a preferred range of close range for these two, while the player units are all set to have a preferred range of short move. Okay. A final new variable is this that's called update index during movement. It's also a variable that's or an option that's not really used in the base toolkit, but from feedback from users, this is something that I think a lot of people will find a use for, and which I will find a use for when I make example levels. If you check this, then while a unit is moving, it will continuously look at which tile it is hovering over and then update its index variable accordingly. Previously, its index variable would stay the same as the tile it started at until it was at its end of its path, and then change to a new one. So this might be useful for something where you want to check whether or not it is entering a tile with a trap, or if you want to suddenly change the movement to a new path going another direction, things like that. But by default, this doesn't do anything, so there's no reason to check it. It does work every tick on the unit, so this shouldn't have any impact. But you know, for many games, there's no use for this, so just leave it blank unless you want to do something where you need to update the index continuously. Yeah, so that's the new these new attributes. Another new variable is initiative, I forgot, which is here, which decides when a unit acts. So the higher its initiative, the earlier it acts. So if this guy has an initiative of 100, or let's see, the AI has an initiative of 300, we would expect this guy first and then this one. So let's see. Yeah, he attacks. Then it's this guy. Then it's this guy. So as you can see, this means that you can have the AI acting before the player, or however you want it. By default, all the player units have an have an initiative of 1. All the AI units have an initiative of 0, and that way this will be similar to how it has been in earlier updates, where all the players act first, then all the enemies act, and the order in which they act is based on the order in which they were placed in the scene. But this way you have you can change this however you want it, and you can also have this like be an attribute of a unit, similar to health or attack. That might be, you know, a benefit to some units. The way things are currently set up, if you want to be able to switch pawns, can players switch pawns, then all units of the same faction should be acting one after the other and not be mixed with the other units, or this will not work as it is currently set up. I will work on fixing that at a later point. Let's see. So I think there's one more thing I haven't mentioned here. Yeah, the update index during movement. So this is something you should not check unless you have something special you need it for. This is so if you activate this, then the unit, while it is moving, will continuously check which tile it is over and then update its index variable accordingly. So by the default Toolkit doesn't use this at all, but this might be useful for doing something like checking if a unit enters a tile that has a trap on it or anything. But unless you add some sort of feature where this is necessary, then you don't need to touch this really. Okay, so that's all the attributes. Now let's talk a bit more about how the new artificial intelligence works and how it differs from the old. So as you can plainly see from the event graph, a lot of things have been changed since the last update. And well, it's bigger, there's more stuff going on, and all of this helps to make the AI more intelligent and more challenging to fight. So I'll just very briefly explain. You see you have this first part where the AI does its pathfinding and finds tiles in range and checks all of that. Then it chooses a target based on what it has found. If it has not found anything, then it searches behind friendly units. So it sees, okay, I cannot reach this guy now, but I'm trying to find whatever unit is closest when I have to go through a friendly unit, which prevents the AI from just standing still if the enemy, the only reachable enemy, is behind a friendly unit. And after it has found a unit, then it selects which unit from the possible choices it wants to attack or move towards, and it finds the path towards it, and then it initializes movement. This is like the basics. Let's explain how this differs from the old AI, since you might not be entirely aware how that used to work. So with the old AI, what the unit would do is to first check its range, and then if it finds anything to attack within that range, then from the possible target it chooses the one with the lowest health and attacks it. If it does not find anything in its range, then it checks its movement, and if it can reach something with its movement, then it moves as close as possible to that target and then checks its range and attacks the target within range with the lowest health. So if there was like a wall, let's see, there was a wall here blocking visibility for this guy. So let's see, if this is an AI controlled an enemy and has a move of 6 and a range of also 6, then this unit will not be able to see this guy, right? So it can't attack it, but since it can't see it, then it will check movement, and then it finds I can reach it, and then it will try to move as close as possible, which would be here, and then it would check its range and attack. So ranged units, if they could not see anything from where they were starting, then they would move as close as possible to something and shoot it point blank if they could, which isn't really the best tactical option in a lot of cases. And if it did not find anything within its movement range, then it would continue searching without or outside its movement range until it found something that it could attack, and then or could reach at least over multiple movements, and then it will move as close as possible it could to that target and then check its range to see if it could attack anything. It's different now in that instead the unit first, well, it will be similar to how it works with the show all possible visible tiles. So if this guy has a movement of 6 and a current move of 6, that's but its initiative like really high. So the AI works in that it checks its movement, and then it checks it from each tile which units can it reach with its attack. So it doesn't check every tile like the player does in this case, because that's pretty inefficient. It only checks the tiles which have units on them. So then it knows all the possible targets that it can reach from its move. And from all of those, it chooses the one with the lowest health. You can change that fairly easily to look for other things, but that's the default. And then when it has chosen a unit, it chooses a tile to go to and attack it from, depending on its preferred range variable. So that's how it works now. That's like the biggest change. And the other change is that, I mean, if these are also the same, these are both players and this is an enemy, right? So there's a friendly unit here. So if there was like, let's see, a wall here, so it's not possible to reach this target because of the wall. With the old AI, then this unit would just give up and just stand there and then wait until it's this guy's turn and he has possibly moved out of the way, at which point the next turn he will move. Now instead he will, after he has checked all the tiles he can possibly reach without having to move through a friendly unit, it will start checking behind friendly units, and then it will move to the closest tile to the target it has found behind the friendly unit that it can reach, which would be this tile in this case. We can set this up so you can see it in action. Let's see. So here's the enemy controlled by the AI. Okay, I'm getting into the extremely high initiative values here. So this is the first one, and normally in the old update it would just stand here, but now you can see that he moves as close as he can. If you want to see this all in action, I recommend you checking out the map we were looking at in the previous video, this bunkers map, where everything, unless I changed it in the last video, if everything is AI controlled, then you can just see the AI duke it out which is entertaining, I think. It was great for bug testing and everything, but it might be good for you guys making like sort of hot seat multiplayer maps and things and just checking out how it works. So those are the basics of AI. I think I might have forgotten one small thing. Let's see here. This one. Can attack with 0 move. This is just a small thing that might be useful in some games. If this is set to false, that means that if some unit has expended its entire move, if it is allowed to split up its move or something like that, if you're using action point system or anything, then you might want to just automatically end the turn of a unit after it has expended all of its moves. So that's just a small option there. I think that should be all of these. Okay, so I recommend that you just play around with the AI a bit, make some stages, set everything up to AI controlled, and just see how it all works. Even though the AI is following a set of pretty basic rules, these changes have made them seem actually a lot more intelligent when you're fighting with them. And just fighting these sorts of ranged units that choose to have a preferred range of long range and something can be a quite frustrating experience if you have like a melee unit, and especially on height maps when they keep running around shooting you from every angle, from the tops of buildings and all of that. It can be a good challenge. So just make some stages, test that out. I will go into the blueprints and explain all of that later in detail, but I won't be doing this in these first few videos, since I don't want to bore you guys too much, and set that up in some separate videos that the ones who enjoy that sort of thing can look through. But that's it for AI, I think. For the next video, I will go through the 2D game example that I've included, which is something I've spent a bit of time making something that's fun to play, that's very different from other sorts of things, and I hope will be enjoyable and provide some inspiration for making some different sorts of games with the toolkit. Okay, see you in the next video.